So welcome everybody. Welcome to Women Who Make. This is our second event in the brand new Derbyshire Makes cultural programme. My name is Claire Tymon and I'm Director of Local, a creative practice based in Derbyshire, and I'm also the Creative Director of Derbyshire Makes. Just a few housekeeping notes before we begin. Your video and audio are automatically turned off, so you can sit back and enjoy the session without worry. The chat is open. Feel free to introduce yourself, share where you're joining from, and chat with other attendees during the session. If you have any questions for our speakers, please do pop them in the Q&A section, and you'll find that at the bottom of your screen. We'll hopefully have time at the end of the session to answer as many as we can. If you have any comments or are experiencing any issues, feel free to use the Q&A section to let us know. We'll do our best to help during the session. And you might notice there's a raised hand button. However, we won't be able to respond to hands raised during the webinar. So please do use the Q&A function if you need anything. The session is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube in the next day or so. Okay, so for those of you who may be new to Derbyshire Makes, you are very welcome today and we're thrilled to have you join us. Derbyshire Makes is a 3-year cultural programme supported by Derbyshire County Council and Arts Council of England. Through this programme, we aim to enable step change in Derbyshire's creative and heritage sector by creating connections to champion making practices. Through collaboration, collective working, education and innovation, we create opportunities for wider engagement while promoting a deeper understanding of making's environmental impact and supporting long-term sector sustainability over the next 5+ years. The programme is designed with a number of programme strands, including a festival programme. We've just completed the first year of the festival, which took place across 6 different hubs over 5 weeks. And we also have an ambitious county-wide year-round programme of projects, events and sector support initiatives. Today, we will be introducing you to Make Room, our art and environmental project, using art making as a way to connect to nature and consider environmental impacts. Women Who Make is a year-round programme of gatherings celebrating artists, makers, designers and activists who identify as women. The programme includes talks, guided walks and studio visits, all aimed at supporting creativity, collaboration and connection. Women Who Make is a platform for sharing skills, insights and stories, and I'm joined by these wonderful women who will help curate the programme. We've got Sam Whelan from Platform 31, artist Sophie Greswell, and Steph Walsh, an artist, photographer and cultural manager. If you would like to get involved in Women Who Make, please let us know by completing the short survey which we'll share towards the end of this session. Make Room is our roaming art programme, exploring local sustainable materials and practices. It offers a place for thinking about how we can all connect with and support nature recovery, environmental sustainability, and climate action through art and making. Make Room is a collaborative project with Glassball Studio and shaped by the local community in each place it will take place. So I'm going to stop sharing and introduce you to our wonderful panel today. I'm delighted to be joined by Cora Glasser of Glassball Studio and lead artist for Make Room. We're also joined by Feimatta Conteh, Sustainability Manager at Arts Council England and also a dear friend of mine, and Lucy Bird, who is a dancer, movement artist, facilitator, healer and sustainability professional. Each will share their experiences of and work with nature and sustainability. Then together we'll explore the powerful role of art and culture plays in deepening these relationships and the unique contributions women make in the world of art, craft and sustainability. We encourage you all to contribute to the conversation today, either by in the chat, where you can have a chat with each other, or if you have a specific question, please do use the Q&A. Otherwise, your questions might get lost for later on. So over to you, Lucy.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. So I'm Lucy. I live in Tideswell in the Peak District National Park, and I moved to Derbyshire about 5 years ago, just before COVID. I can't believe it's been that long already. There's basically sort of 3 strings to my bow. I'm a trained dancer. I'm also a sustainability professional and a therapist. And where possible, I try to blend those different skills together in my work. I have held various kind of straight sustainability roles. I'm not going to go through my whole CV with you all, but I'm currently a project manager at Derbyshire Dales Community Energy, where we're basically supporting local communities to develop their own and own their own renewable energy projects. And before that, I was a sustainability manager at Rhombear Dance Company, which is a contemporary dance company based in London. So that was all about looking at the sort of environmental impact of dance productions and touring and how the theatre industry can become more sustainable. I've also created a movement and reflective practice called Nature Dance, which uses dance, meditation, journaling and practical nature connection practices, which help people connect more deeply, both with themselves and with the rest of nature. And I run workshops and retreat days to facilitate that. So I've been asked to talk about my work and my values in relation to the themes of creativity, collaboration, and connection. So in terms of creativity and what drives it, I guess my dance work is my most obviously creative work. And the drivers for that are really partly a desire for self-expression, but also for embodying the natural world around me. So I like to try on what it's like to be a silver birch, or to be an ancient rock, or to be a river through my body. And that gives me the kind of perspective and experiences of those more than human beings. I have a desire to create beauty and to feel part of the beauty that I experience in the natural world. And I would say dance, because it's such a physical experience, it really grounds me and it makes me feel that I'm fully alive. My sustainability work is also really creative, although it might be less obvious. And the drivers of creativity in that, for me, really are just this desire to find resolutions to complex problems, whether that's the complexity of how a company functions and interacts with the rest of the world, and how you can adapt that company's actions towards more regenerative outcomes, or just the bigger complexity of the environmental crisis and what those stepping stones might be to resolve it. So all of that requires a huge amount of creative thought. I also have a desire to make all the work that I do fun, and bringing a creative approach into my more serious sustainability work does make it more enjoyable for me. In terms of collaboration and who I collaborate with, I guess my main collaboration is with the rest of nature, and this sense of listening to nature, because the majority of the work that I do is for the benefit of the natural world. There's a lot of collaboration within the sustainability sector itself, as Feimatta will know. There's a lot of support and knowledge sharing between people who work in this sector, because it's hard and you're generally working in sustainability for quite altruistic reasons, like the pay is not great, it's quite hard to achieve your goals. So people really do band together as much as they can. In terms of my nature dance and movement practice, I do collaborate on kind of longer retreat days with other artistic professionals, and I'll show some images in a moment of a retreat day that we did last month. So I tend to collaborate with people who can bring something different than what I can. So last month, I co-facilitated a day called Weaving Our Wild Ways in Shining Cliff Woods, which is near Belper. And that was all about nurturing connections to nature and co-creating with the participants a group response to the day and the season. It was on the 2nd of March, so it was the turning of the seasons, and expressed that through creative practice. So I brought the dance and the movement and the physical relationship with nature. Another facilitator called Sammy brought songs and sounding, and then another facilitator, Cherry, brought in crafting, and she helped us use natural materials to kind of co-create our sacred space. And at the end of the day, we wove together all those aspects. So wove together song with movement in the space to have this kind of collective response to what we'd experienced. So if I just share my screen. To give you a flavour of what that work looks like. That's just the flyer. So that's me and Cherry on the left, who was the crafter, and Sammy on the right, who was the singer. And here, basically, in the morning, you can see this is the clearing that we'd found in the woodland. There are some yellow bits of paper on the floor, and we worked with the group to kind of elicit what their responses to this turning of the season was, where they were at in their lives. We kind of gathered different themes around places, personal places that people are at in their lives and aspects of nature that were really speaking to them that day. And we gathered them into themes and wrote them on paper and put them around the space. And then people crafted in response to those themes. So Cherry had set up this basic willow structure wigwam for people to decorate with natural materials, fallen leaves, ivy, daffodils, primroses, and some scraps of materials. So it was all very sustainably and ethically sourced. And this is it sort of coming to life as people wove their interpretation of those themes into the willow structure, some feathers at the top. And yeah, we used the whole space. People were drawing shapes in the earth itself that we would then dance on. There was pine cones, there were kind of flower altars laid around the space. So we really kind of adorned the whole space and imbued it with the themes that we'd felt were important that day. This is a little example from the movement workshop that I led. I think this is just part of the warm-up where we're all exploring expansion and reaching for the light, like the trees. And this is a clip just from the end of the day. We made this as everybody shared their experiences of the day. We each wove with a piece of string to create this kind of visible representation of a web to really show us how we were interconnected. So yeah, that's just a little flavour of the kind of dance work that I lead. And just to wrap up, the last theme was around connection and how we connect with nature and values through our work. And I would say that nature and my personal values run through the core of all my work. I have a desire for nature to thrive. And by nature, I mean that to include people. So for me, life is really about creating ways for us to live in harmony with the rest of nature so that we can all thrive together. And my core values for that centre around love, compassion, reciprocity, and interconnectedness. And they're the foundations of all my work across the different areas. Thank you, Claire.
That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Lucy. That's yeah, really fascinating. I've written loads of notes for us to pick up shortly. Oh great, the chat seems to be working. Hopefully it is working for everybody. Can I now pass over to Feimatta?
Hello
Hi.
everybody. Apologies for joining late and not having a background like everybody else, but I'm in a small meeting pod here in the office, and I just thinking actually as I'm in this day where I'm jumping from meetings to meetings, you're like, is that really the rhythm that we want to be working at? Is that how much are we going against that? But thank you so much for that, Lucy. I just really love that idea of embodying values and being in your body and feeling and acknowledging those things as you work, because I think so often in jobs you spend so much time in your heads that you kind of have to go, well, how is this feeling anyway? And then also thinking when you were talking there about the turning of the seasons and feeling that happening, I don't know if anybody else is sort of feeling a more of a fizzing sense around now as the days get lighter and things getting more, and just kind of learning to manage those bits of energy. Sorry, hello everybody. I'm Feimatta Conteh. I use the pronouns she, her, and I'm, like I said, sitting in a pod in the office, in the Arts Council office in Manchester. I've worked at Arts Council now for just over a year or so in the environmental responsibility team. I have got some slides to share. I do generally speak slightly off the cuff and go there. And as Claire said, you know, we met working together at Future Everything many years ago, and so it's really lovely. And yeah, thinking about what you're saying there about the turning of the seasons and actually thinking about some examples just to share with people. So Future Everything, where Claire and I work, they're in the process at the moment of adding nature to their board. So what does it look like when you give nature a voice in a deep systemic way into an organization? And I'm fascinated to see how it goes with that, because one of the things I was thinking about, like, how do you account for seasonality in that? How do you account for when nature is blooming and abundant and when nature is drawing in and you know, restoring itself? So I'm following that and seeing how that's going. And then also Julie's Bicycle, who are an organization I'm sure many of you would know about. And they're the partner for the environmental programme we run at Arts Council. I think in the next few weeks, they're about to publish an almanac for creative freelancers, which is a resource for various ways of embedding climate action. But interestingly, they've made it a seasonal almanac. So things to be kind of thinking and working through in through the seasons. And you know, we read a draft of it recently and shared it with some colleagues within Arts Council, and that was something that everybody was really positive about, this idea of seasonality and doing that. So yeah, I think all those things. So I'm just going to share a few slides and chat as I go through them about the ideas and thoughts that came to me around those three themes of collaboration, connection, and creativity. And hopefully this will work. I've not done that. So yeah. Hopefully everybody can see my screen now. Sorry, I'm more used to Teams than Zoom, so forgive me. Hopefully you can do that. So one of the first things that popped into my head when it came through collaboration, so you know, I've worked around sustainability, environmental responsibility, whatever you call it, in the cultural sector for many years, like over 10 years or so. And in 2015, I was invited to be a contributor to this book, which is called Playing for Time, Making Art as If the World Mattered. So Lucy Neal brought together probably about 20 of us or so to think about the role that artists can play in rethinking the future, and how art has such an essential role to play in thinking about how we might reshape our world from where we are now and into a more collaborative, more equitable one that not only looks at resolving planetary challenges, but it is abundant and regenerative and you know, those things that Lucy's been talking about, reciprocity and things. And actually is thinking that, you know, this book was published in 2015 and then republished in 2023 because Lucy felt, you know, there'd been people asking for it to be republished and to bring it out. And I was just thinking, actually, the people that I met in 2015, they're still people that I kind of cross paths with and I still connect with. And for me, this idea of collaboration is that some of the solutions to the challenges that we're facing in there are going to come through the networks that we make, through us acting in the places where we are, but knowing what other people are doing in different places and sharing knowledge and wisdom and experience through our networks. So this was the first thing that came to me when thinking about where's collaboration happened in my work. And I really feel that you know, working now at Arts Council and think it's just the importance of networks, the importance of knowledge not coming from one centralized place and being disseminated out, but from people acknowledging that knowledge is in different points and we need to bring the different points together so we can share in it. And I think that's a really interesting conversation about, you know, so veering off now about kind of power and control, and it's like how do we build a regenerative system? And I think it's by acknowledging that it's collaborative, that it's networked. So when I was thinking about connection, this is a picture here, that's my son on the left. I'm not very good at left and right, but that's when we were on holiday in Dumfries a couple of years ago, and that's the first time he discovered bilberries. So we were in the forest, he skipped around, honestly didn't prompt him to do this, but he was saying, thank you, nature, thank you for these beautiful things you've given. And that's an image that I have on my phone because it makes me go, always remember those things and the connections that you make. And then this other image that I have on here is from a camp that I was on last year. So throughout my life, I've been involved with an organisation called Forest School Camps. And so each year I've gone camping for 2 weeks and lived in a community in a field with no digital things, no phones, no connections, just living in community with between 50 and 70 people. And this was a camp that I ran last year in Sussex. And one of the philosophies of FSC is that you learn by doing, not by listening, not by being told, but by embodying, like Lucy was talking about, by feeling it and doing it. And you teach by being, which is also the flip side of it. So you don't teach by telling and pushing out and things, but it's in the way that you are and be. And I realized that actually that philosophy has been how I am in the world, and it just, even the conversation we had as panelists yesterday and being in this session is kind of getting me to think of, like, how am I bringing that into my work where I am now? So it's giving me that pause and giving me that thing, but like, how am I, I don't have to, in the world that I'm going, right, everybody, we all now have to sit in circles and do this, but how can I bring in some of these ideas that have really deepened my core values? How do I bring that into my work, and how does that show up for me? So yeah, these things that I'm thinking about. And then the final one, about creativity. This was just something that I'd come across, and through a network that I used to be part of when I wasn't at Arts Council, which is called GMAST. So over in the Greater Manchester region, I know we're in Derbyshire today, but you're close enough. Of all people working in cultural organisations kind of committed to environmental responsibility, one of which is the Castlefield Gallery. And so they've been running this series for artists, I think for a few years or so, called Spark, where you bring artists together, go for a walk, often in nature, often in different places. Different artists will host it. I love this idea of an ongoing conversation through creative people and their practice, and bringing it out and using that as a way of having conversations about this moment that we're in with regards to the climate crisis, and creative ways we can be thinking and developing solutions about it. So I'll stop sharing my screen now, and I hope, that some of that made some sense, and it was just a small outpouring of my brain right now. So thank you very much for having me today.
Thanks, Feimatta. Again, just loads of kind of connections. I feel there's even in the two introductions that we've had, that the growing ecology of connections, like even between the three of us who've spoken, and and you've picked up some key words that I'm going to bring up in the chat next around regenerative and abundance, and that, I don't even know if I can say this, reciprocity.
Reciprocity.
There you go. And just this new language that, well, it might not be new to a lot of people, but it's these words are falling more and more into my space. And so I think that's a good segue into Cora, and thank you so much, Cora, for joining us today. And I know we've had a lot of conversations around language and kind of definitions around kind of nature recovery, nature connectedness, and that is where Make Room has a big role to play, I think, in Derbyshire Makes programme, is us creating this space to have these connections and this shared language. So I won't take up any more of your time. I'll hand over to you now.
That's great. Thank you very much. And yes, it's been fascinating to hear, and and the discussions that we've had, even just regarding this webinar, have already sparked some ideas and further thoughts for myself. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce my practice as an artist, and then sort of show you as a journey using the creativity, collaboration and connection, but as a way sort of showing that through my journey of how I've come to being here and the Make Room project in a bit more detail. So I will share my screen, and hopefully let's just see everything works. Okay, so what I wanted to do is actually take the opportunity to sort of discuss the kind of many hats that I wear, and I know everyone seems to do that these days, but I wanted to kind of talk to you about the fact that I have sort of parallel practices that run alongside each other. So I have my individual practice, and I also have a collaborative practice as well. And I'm also a mum, I'm also a builder, I'm also, I don't know, various other things that I can wear different hats each day, but all of it really kind of, forms myself as a person and as a practitioner. My individual practice is kind of used to be very much kind of connected to lens-based media and film work. My work is a lot about understanding memory and place, and how that can be translated through time and through different mediums that I end up working with. My work has been shown in this country as well as in Europe, and a lot of my prints, for example, have been collected in different collections. But one of the things I just want to show you, just like some quick video as well, that a lot of my work will be, especially my film-based work, is single shot, usually not edited, but basically kind of looking at the idea of capturing a moment, something that's caught me, made me stop and think, and normally that's within a sort of natural setting, for example. So and it's just little things like that that I sort of capture and then either sort of show in a different context, or, for example, put it into more traditional gallery spaces, and kind of use that interplay between what's been captured, but also thinking about the idea of it being like an expanded form of drawing as well. That's particularly really important. I know we've talked on this, maybe we'll link back into Make Room, but when I first sort of came to Derbyshire about 25 years ago now, I think, I was really deeply fascinated by this idea of this a working landscape, and the idea that there is these juxtapositions between extraction and heavy industry, and then this kind of bucolic landscape of the national park, all of these jostling together, I found really, really fascinating. And I'm still sort of investigating that to this day. But again, I also find a lot of my work, I mean, this is a film still, but a lot of my work is looking at how nature is kind of, finds its way back into these spaces that we create. The other thing as well, I'm really particularly keen on trying to understand the definition of the word nature as well. I know we use it a lot, but actually for me, nature shouldn't be, when you start to use that word, it becomes other. And I find that sometimes a little bit tricky. I want to try and think about actually repositioning myself within that, thinking that, well, I am nature. I am a fluid body. I'm carrying practically 2 kilograms worth of microbes and bacteria, all these things that, we are kind of coexisting systems. And I think that's something that I find that, as Claire was just mentioning about language can separate us from the issues and the things that we're trying to discuss and talk about. And also the idea that when I do sort of mention nature, I am using it with a capital N as well, and talking about it having, it's autonomous, it's a living entity, it should hold personhood and legal rights. And I know there's a lot of that going on in the world at the moment, talking about nature law and things like that. So really fascinating subjects regarding that. Like I said, my work does sort of involve a sort of expanded drawing practice. I'm afraid I don't draw on paper, I draw on surfaces where I find them, and I like to kind of interact with them along the way. So that's sort of my individual practice. Hopefully you can then maybe see some links into the collaborative practice. This was founded with myself and my partner back in around sort of 2001. I was told to kind of produce some slides, and I'm afraid I've just thrown lots of images at you guys, because there's 25 years of collaborative practice nearly, or 24 years. There's so many things that we've kind of done and got involved in, but a lot of it is working outside of traditional gallery spaces. For example, it's public realm work, it's working with sites and place, and archives in particular as well, and collections. So I have, again, really interested in the idea of materials and materiality as well. So even just that image of the LV18, for example, down in Harwich, we were commissioned to do a sort of town-wide sort of public art trail And we used copper paint, which was found on the bottom of boats after I was speaking to people, you know, in the kind of harbour, what sort of, you know, special materials that they use. And then that sort of transferred into the actual final piece. The chap who owns the boat, he still kind of sends me update pictures. It's still verdigraying and it's still kind of creating interesting patterns and shapes. So I really like the idea. And that's actually most probably the only piece of permanent artwork we've ever produced. So we only usually work with sort of temporary sites and temporary interventions. Very quickly as well, just talking about a project which, I mean, these are slides from a loom, which is based in Skelmersdale, which is a new town in Lancashire. This kind of is again a sort of another practice that's sort of running in parallel, but we've been working in this town for the past sort of 10 years, exploring its heritage, its new town heritage, but looking at how it's kind of stereotypes of kind of new towns is not reflected in the place, and it's actually a really green place. It's really interesting to look at that sort of juxtaposition as well, but also again creating spaces to show work and to kind of experience work, heritage work, for example, or things inspired by images and things, artifacts that we found within this space. And then leading on to, which is the project that actually where I met Claire and discussed, which is Guideline, which was working with the Peak District National Park Authority and various rangers and volunteers looking at the boundary, which extends from Glossop to Diggle, just a sort of section of the Peak District National Park boundary, around the time it was celebrating its 70th anniversary. But alongside that, what we were really thinking about was this mark on a map is kind of, it was almost like an act of imagination and collective agreement, but it was also invisible, which is something I found really fascinating. There is loads of ideas around this, talking about edges. I've recently discovered research talking about the edge effect and ecotones, where, for example, when biodiversity is kind of really fluid and fertile, for example, around these edges of forests or rivers or lakes, for example. And I felt that sort of translated itself into ideas as well, and the kind of working process that we had. So the picture on the right, for example, it was the first time I think I've experienced this as well, is actually using a river as a co-author in the work. So this river runs along the boundary, and I wanted to kind of make a piece of work with it. And my partner and I were just sort of discussing on the day, well, how can we draw with the river? How can we kind of, co-author and co-create a piece of work together? What was interesting is there's a little bridge, people were walking over it, riding over it, so that's fine. They interact with the paper in that way. But as soon as we moved the paper into the river then contorted the paper, and that's it was making its mark with it. And then we took it out onto the bank and let it dry, and sort of in that really hot sunny day, and it sort of contorted. It was taking on this movement that it sort of picked up within the river. And I just thought this was a really fascinating sort of piece of work for us. It kind of led us into other kind of areas of thinking about how you create authentic collaboration as well. That's something that was really, really intrigued about. And again, working with our other artists and collaborating with the fantastic artists such as Alison Lloyd, looking at, a sort of an embodied practice as well, and thinking about the sort of sense of water and movement and how you can kind of reflect that in the work. It's just another little quick sort of video, but we were again experimenting with the idea of how do you think about scale? How do you think about text, for example? We found out the original boundary was only in text form, 2 paragraphs for about this whole 16 miles of boundary. So we actually then wanted to take the text back into the landscape and actually kind of play around with the idea of scale, and the sort of that physicality of, kind of working with that landscape, which again, it was another form of a kind of a collaboration for us, which was deeply fascinating. And then also one of the things that we do find really interesting is using technologies to kind of create, again, expanding our drawing practice. So we use LiDAR quite a lot to kind of use it as a form of mark making and collecting marks within the landscape. So on the image on the left is actually a group of people that we took up on a guided walk with Alison Lloyd, contouring the landscape. And then I kind of captured the impression of the group as they'd moved through the grass. So I really found that I just wanted to hold on to that moment, because we were talking about a safe space to make work within a rural space, for example, as well. So that again was like another form of collaboration with that place and with that material. And also just very quickly to mention, I'm also a maker of books. I love to make books. And I also really enjoy the process of artist-made books, and thinking about that idea of, is it documentation or is it another form of artwork in itself from a project? So yeah, that book is currently in production and I'm really excited about it. It's like, yeah, taking on its own life, really important. So I know I'm really kind of tight on time, so I just wanted to talk about Make Room. Now, Make Room is, in some respects, I'm going to have to read this because I know it's such a vast project that if I don't, I'll get it slightly wrong. But Make Room for us in its kind of in its form at the moment is a transformative roaming arts initiative in Derbyshire that fosters collaboration, environmental awareness and sustainable practice. Both as a physical and conceptual space, it invites communities to engage with nature through creative placemaking and collective action, exploring the central question of how can nature reinvent us. And I think that really holds sway with regards to what is taking place with the project at the moment. We're really thinking about that the Make Room is sort of weaving together sort of an artistic experimentation with environmental inquiry. It's inviting communities, artists, thinkers, and makers to contribute to an evolving conversation around land, reciprocity, and regenerative futures. Now, thankfully, I managed to say that. I didn't be able to say that last time. So, but again, I think that's something we should pick up in a bit in maybe in the questions about the idea of what do we mean by regenerative futures, and this kind of circularity that I think is something that we're really keen to explore. So it's not just a space, it's not just a place, it's an idea, it's a movement, it's a roaming act of imagination. It's rooted in the Derbyshire's landscapes. It's an evolving site-responsive art programme that invites communities to reimagine their relationship with nature, through action research and hands-on making. And I would say that Glassball Studio as a practice is very heuritic, it's kind of hands-on making, and I think that's what I'm really excited to kind of share with you. As Claire kind of indicated, there has been a lot of research going on because, I'm no expert with regarding, how do we create a touring program which is sustainable? How do we think about working within these spaces? And I think we talked about this yesterday, the idea that it's the idea that moves, not the materials. How do we then work that out? How do we then create a touring program that is of its place at each location that we find ourselves? In particular with Derbyshire, it is extremely wonderfully diverse in different landscapes and forms and materials. I'm really interested as well in kind of like how materials move in and out of Derbyshire. It's one of the things I found, which I find fascinating, is that in Vermeer's painting with the girl with the pearl earring, that beautiful white of the pearl that was created is actually from the limestone in Derbyshire. So it was sought out as its kind of, for its pure, it's for its pure qualities. And I find that amazing that it's got these materials have kind of, transformed themselves into different locations and artworks as well. So I've been working again to think about how we present our ideas, because there's so many facets to this project that we've been creating kind of little, I suppose, zines that will kind of build in our sort of Make Room mobile sort of library that we're sort of creating, which we're gathering books that we find interesting and want to share with people, and looking about what's lying beneath our feet and, how those narratives can affect art making processes and an art making response. I'm really keen to say as well that when we get involved in projects, we don't it's not on the surface. We really want to try and get involved, and we will volunteer, for example, with local groups to kind of find out what's going on. There's an image there. I'm sure Dave won't mind if I share, digging with the Whitfield friends of Whitfield Rec, and just kind of wanting, because through that action, through that kind of collaboration, you're talking, you're making connections, and you're also kind of showing that form of like exchange. Again, I think that's really, really important. So yes, and focusing on the local, which means that, these ideas then grow from that. We've been working really interesting with Craftwood, which is, a land which it's really fascinating story. It's a site of resilience. It's a former tip in the 70s, but it's also now 50 years on, for example. It's now a beautifully wooded space, which is used for crafting and all kinds of other activities. And it's a really safe space. I find it's extremely enveloping and comforting to work there and to visit there. And through these visits, you'll start to see how we then think about the make room for the festival period. So if you can just see on the back, on the right-hand side, we actually saw this kind of 70s tent frame, and we were inspired by the idea that when we come to do festivals, we wanted to create a familiar shape that people would understand as a room. And Thomas at Craftwood was very kindly kind of adapted it for us, worked with us to create a structure. It's actually his parents' old tent frame. And I love that because it was, we were reusing and repurposing. And so then we thought about regarding how we were going to work with the festival periods across the 6 hubs. We were working with Hina and Glossop in particular, and thinking about, okay, there is the sustainable use of materials. We try to be really resourceful with regarding to using cardboard, for example, so we can recycle it. But then obviously still thinking about, is that enough? Obviously, but within a festival setting, it was really interesting. And we asked people to share their nature memories with us. What were their nature memories, and how has it changed, or how has it kind of developed over the years? And all ages got involved. It was fantastic. Met ecologists, we met historians, we met people who survey for volunteer surveying, all that kind of stuff. It was brilliant. We also did a sort of nature walk as well, really quickly, and we kind of went and we basically made friends with one of the trees in the local park, and we kind of created these sort of 3D rubbings, which were then brought back into the site as well. But yeah, really, again, never underestimate the experience and knowledge of your communities that you're working within. Then this kind of transformed into another iteration of Make Room in Glossop, which again was really nice because we were on grass this time, so it had a different feel. The fabric that you can see that's being used was the fabric that you saw in that drone footage. So it's kind of we're repurposing the boundary marking fabric back into the Make Room. So the fabric was used from not far from Glossop, actually. So it was really nice to kind of have that fabric. It had another life to it. And then people shared their nature memories, or young people would just draw what they felt that that was important to them for nature. Really, really beautiful experience. And then just towards the end, the sun came out. It was great. It looked really nice space. And then the following day in Glossop, we then, due to the weather, we kind of moved inside, and then we created sort of kind of 3D sculptural zines, which looked at people's, again, nature memory or kind of nature sort of thoughts or feelings that they wanted to share. And the one on the right I loved. It was a chap who actually wasn't very communicative. He didn't know how to express himself, but he kind of did this drawing, and then he didn't want to write what it was. And I said, well, tell me what what do you think that is? It's regrowth. It's my regrowth. And I thought, well, that's great. It was really lovely to have that and share that. So hopefully I've given you a really whistle tour of kind of Make Room, where we are. But again, I just want to land with that, the idea of connection. For me, nature is imagination. So hopefully I will stop sharing, and then feel free to ask some questions along the way. It'd be really exciting to hear what you think. So okay, let me stop.
Thank you so much, Cora. Yeah, it is really nice to kind of have an opportunity, isn't it, for us to talk about this project. It's still very much evolving and developing with partners. I had like a 2-hour call last week with Derbyshire County Council's Environment Department, who just can see so many benefits to this work, and just really want to kind of partner with us more, and they see it as a way of kind of making the, I can't remember what the strategy is called. I don't think it's net zero strategy. They have a nature maybe recovery strategy. They've probably got both, actually, but they really they can really see how us going out into communities with Make Room will kind of give kind of make the strategies more relevant and appropriate, and yeah, and that's just one partner. You know, there's lots of partners who are just really keen to get involved. So how we'll develop this over the coming years is going to be really interesting, and having these conversations as well with like-minded people. So we've got about 12-15 minutes for a quick conversation, and I've been avidly kind of making lots of notes, and and we do have the Q&A. We've got a very shy crowd today, plenty of provocations ourselves. I think I mean, I mentioned earlier the language that we're using around this way of working still can you know, the purpose of Make Room is to break down those barriers to people, to communities, to have conversations around climate change, environmental sustainability. They're really big terms, and it can be incredibly overwhelming, and then these words kind of come through as well. I think, yeah, the question that I have for the three of you is, I suppose, as we're developing this and now going out working in communities around Make Room, how do we make this more accessible in terms of language? Have you got, what experience do you have that you could maybe share that not dummies it down, but even gives us confidence to go and open up these conversations? How might we do that? What have you done previously or seen that has been quite effective? You all need to unmute and have this is why we're here, to have a chat.
That is so. Sorry, I will just dive in because my brain starts and then go. I don't think I have any example, but it is such a reminder for me, Claire. Thank you for that, because I guess I spend my days deep in a world of sort of jargon and acronyms, and you suddenly have to go, oh, that doesn't mean anything to people. Like, how do you make it meaningful? And thinking of, not in a patronizing or childish way or whatever, but it's about telling stories, isn't it? Because that's what you engage with, and that's what you do there. So there's two things that came through: stories and food. What brings people together? Because I remember when when you first had introduced me to the term Make Room, the first place my brain went to was Make Room round the table. And then you're sitting around, I mean, I've just sort of fantasy thing here, sitting around a table sharing food and seeing where the conversations go to. Sorry, I'm going to let somebody else speak because it feels like I have something more wise to say.
I completely agree, Feimatta, with what you said around, stories and food. They are things that connect people. I think I'd also say, in response for me, has been around positive language massively. So when I did my sustainability masters, like that, there was quite a lot of negative language, and there still is in the news and everywhere really, around climate change and environmental destruction, and it just makes people shut off. Like, we know this, we have research that shows us that kind of language psychologically makes us shut down. So for me, in my work, especially in my mainstream sustainability work especially, it's really important to use positive language, because people are much better at getting behind a cause that they want to work towards rather than running away from something that they want to avoid. And it's much more effective if you can galvanize people to work towards something positive rather than run away from something negative. And I think that maybe leads into a word that we wanted to unpick around regeneration, which I think we've probably all four of us mentioned this morning. And just our kind of preference for that word over sustainability, because sustainability implies that you're just keeping things the same or stopping them from getting worse, which is that kind of slightly neutral / negative framing. Whereas regeneration, to me anyway, but open to input from the others, means making the world a better place, kind of how we contribute to a better future rather than just stopping things getting worse. So it's got that positive future focus.
Definitely. And I also think as well, with the work that I've been doing, especially like in Skelmersdale, for example, it's really interesting because the word utopia is always used. It's always like, oh, the failed utopia, this kind of stuff. But it's really interesting because none of the, residents, for example, even think that. It's not that at all. It's just that outside view. And I think it's the same with this kind of form of language, and language can be deeply dividing, and I think that that's something that I'm really, really conscious in. And I think with the Make Room at the festivals, for example, I didn't use the word at all. I didn't use any kind of jargon or whatever. I just said it's about this, really kind of simplified, but it's through the act of doing. Is that heuristic kind of approach, that hands-on approach, then opens up those conversations, like you said, Feimatta, that when you're sitting around a table eating, those conversations and those things naturally flow, don't they? And it's not like you're kind of forcing it. But I think regeneration for myself is really important to think about it. It's restoring, it's rethinking, it's replenishing, and it's that idea of like, okay, those sound massive, but actually they can be done really small, in small ways, and thinking about yourself, within that. So
yeah, I think you just, sorry, Corey, you just mentioned something there about small and large, and people that sense of overwhelm, Lucy, that you're talking about when you think about sustainability and or trying to solve the climate crisis. It's all so big, but actually realizing that the small actions are the things that connect us and do us. So I don't know if anyone's come across a thinker called Adrienne Marie Brown. Like, I've not actually managed to read any of the books, but she has a strategy called Emergent Strategy about kind of networks and resilience and things. And what's one of the things that she has in it is like, small is all, small is everything. Is like the small moments of connection actually are what amplify out into bigger things. So it's to not disregard the small action and to think that everything has to be on a large scale. And then another thing that kind of, I guess, an image that comes to me, and I've used when I've been speaking before, is as a David Mitchell novel, Cloud Atlas, and there's an image at the end of it where someone says, well, actually, what my action that I'm taking is only a drop, it's just a drop in the ocean. And the response is, well, what's an ocean but a multitude of drops? It's like seeing your action not just as your action, but seeing it in connection with other people. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Thanks, Feimatta. I think something we were chatting about, the four of us, yesterday as well, was this kind of notion of action research, learning by doing. I think I've written it down: teach by being, and this notion of embodying. And I think the kind of uncertainty around not only kind of the world that we're living in at the moment, and who knew we'd have a heat wave in April, and I'm sat here and I'm really hot, and it's but yeah, especially when delivering a cultural program and not exactly being able to say, I mean, this is a I suppose a little bit of feedback for Arts Council, because we need to be kind of saying, as part of the funding for Derbyshire Makes, this is what we're going to deliver over the next 3 years. But actually taking an action research approach, that can be quite challenging. It's like, here's our methodology, but we want to co-create this with communities and have these conversations that will then help shape and develop the work over the coming months and years. And I suppose, yeah, how we might it's not managing expectations, but how we advocate for this kind of slow way of working, this action research approach. And action research is even quite an academic term. So yeah, I'd really welcome your thoughts on that. Anybody?
Yeah, well, what it speaks to me, Claire, is about how in the process of kind of, let's just say, sort of funding admin for shorthand, or so, how you can maintain that sort of integrity and authenticity and actually fully represent the project, isn't it? Because you say like, oh, just write something, it's there, but it's like, well, actually, if there's that process there, how do you align align those things when you don't know what the outputs are going to be, but you also want to represent that in a fair and honest way. I have made a note, and I think we'll have to come back to that conversation. But I think what this speaks to, without getting too grandiose or sort of standing in it, is like, do the current systems and processes and things we have serve us in the ways that we want to be working? You know, that's the fundamental question. And it's not kind of like, oh God, how are we going to dismantle everything? But what can we do in small ways that make that work? And I you know, like you said, in terms of sort of arts funding and development and those things, yeah, I think there needs to be some shifts in it.
And so much of what action research seems to be about is about listening.
Mm.
That's kind of just communicating that you can't deliver something without knowing what a local community or the people that you're working with actually want or are able to receive, or what will benefit them in terms of nature connection or space to air and share about issues that concern them, or whatever it is that you're engaging with them with. So I think that, yeah, that has to be a huge part of it. And it's so important that we learn to listen to those kind of context and place specific needs. And that is really one of the huge benefits, I think, of action research.
Definitely. And I also would just like to add as well that I've been reading a fantastic book by James Bridle, Ways of Being, and also just that talking about understanding, you know, new forms of intelligence and actually learning to listen to those new forms of knowledge and intelligence. It's really interesting. He uses the fact that since developing AI, actually it's enabled us to actually understand how to listen to, you know, sort of mycelium networks and things like that. You know, we've actually now got the processing power to understand how they're communicating or whatever. But I just think that idea of, you know, staying curious and being attentive to different forms of knowledge within your practice. And I think, Claire, we've discussed this in the part of kind of a community of practice, I think is something that I find really, really fascinating, that no one's going to be the expert. No one's going to have the answers. No one's going to, but if we work together, then little things will start to slot into place, and organising locally. But one of the things as well, it came from a conversation with Rachel Smith at Makeshift when we were discussing the Hina Festival, and it really has stuck with me, and I'm really grappling with this at the moment. But what happens when we let go? And that is something that I really find quite, you know, it's quite unnerving. It's quite disconcerting in some way, because, well, what does that actually mean? But what was really interesting is that nature knows how to organize itself. You know, it doesn't need us telling it what to do, does it? But we need to learn from that and learn from nature as a form of new forms of assembling. And I think that, you know, the information's all around us. It's there. It's just we've got to learn. And as Lucy was saying, to listen, to feel, and to kind of, yeah, embody that new form of knowledge. And I think since reading, I've been reading another fantastic book. I think it's by oh gosh, can I find it? Yeah. Sarah Spencer, Think Like a Tree. You know, there's all these wonderful, brilliant books out there. But talking about, when I was speaking to a group when we were doing the rubbing around the tree, I sort of dropped in these kind of, you know, phrases. And I said, oh, do you know that, you know, we actually share some DNA with trees? You know, do you realize that, you know, evolutionary, we are still connected in some very, very distant way? You know, are you aware that there's those sort of connections? And ever since I've been reading about it and reading about how trees communicate, how trees support and create communities themselves, I have just been looking at my, you know, my space, my green space around me in a completely different way. And I think that goes back, sorry, one quick way of just responding to what you said as well, about, well, how do we reconnect? How do we, you know, I haven't got time for this, I haven't got time for that. But just by walking to my car to get to another place, for example, I walk past a tree, and now for a little 2 or 3 seconds, I'll stop and I'll just have a look, because I just need to kind of remind myself that I'm next to this arboreal, if I can say it right, a form of intelligence that, you know, have I discounted it? Have I ignored it? But actually, just by reading some of these books, I'm really finding it's opening up my way of thinking about this. And I would say that's the joy of having this chance to do this action research, actually. And I want to then obviously share that with people I meet and work with throughout the Make Room project. So
thanks, Cora. And I think, you know, certainly how we're approaching this for Make Room is that action research is action-packed with conversations, with participatory experiences, with workshops, with talks, with as you said earlier, sharing our library, so the reference material. So over the next coming months, but definitely sooner than that as well, we're going to use the project page on the Derbyshire Makes website to share everything that we're learning, and we invite others to do the same, you know, to kind of share anything with us that we can then contribute to the room, and make that available. And someone's just asked if we're connected with Miles Richardson at the University of Derby. We absolutely are. We've reached out to Miles, and now that the festival's finished, we can kind of have more capacity to make something more of that connection, and lots of others. So we're gonna have a bit more of a chat. So we were due to finish at 1, but as it's being recorded, we're just going to, because we've got like a million questions that I have. Oh, we've got another in the Q&A. Let me just, okay. And then you can catch up online if you have to go now. But thank you to those who have joined us today. And do stay on if you can. I'd like to oh gosh, we've just got so much that we could cover around kind of our, you know, those of us who are working in this space and who are very passionate and who are advocates and who are trying to develop these projects and these activities and then get the funding, and but like how we care for ourselves in this process. You know, it's a really big, and like you said, it can, you know, it can be negative, it can be scary, it can be unknown, and trying to convince others or educate others or share with others who might not necessarily agree with what we're doing or see the point in what we're doing, and that requires us to look after ourselves and to and for me, like being in this space and having this conversation is where I get my care, because I'm, you know, working with like-minded people. And so yeah, I wondered, maybe just really briefly, how we might care for ourselves whilst working in this space.
It's a huge question, isn't it? I think for me, there's a lot. I've got my own sort of quite a spiritual person, so I've got my own kind of spiritual practice, and spend a lot of time when I can. I've got a toddler, so my time is limited, but you know, spending time outdoors barefoot when I can, just kind of all the, not to sound cliched, but all the kind of nature care practices that and nature connection aspects that are really supportive. But I think as a more pithy response, and to not go into the everything of self-care, I was driving the other day to run a community consultation on putting solar panels over car parks in the Derbyshire Dales. And I was running this community consultation to get feedback from people, and driving, feeling a bit nervous, wondering if there was going to be, didn't know if people were going to be quite opposed to it or not. So I was feeling a bit, just a bit nervous about it all. And a song was playing, and there was a quite cheesy line, but it said, in the song, it said, "I'm not afraid because I'm the love, and you shouldn't be afraid because you are the love too." And I just thought, actually, that is what it was about. It was about meeting the community in this meeting with, like, lovingly, regardless of what their view is of the project that we're discussing. It's about listening lovingly, like being compassionate to myself, being compassionate to them, and not feeling kind of defensive, just creating space for listening and treating myself and those other people in the room with love, regardless of whether we agreed on a particular topic or not. And I just felt so much calmer in that moment. And I mean, actually, the community were really pro the project, but that's kind of besides the point. It's like, they might not have been, and that's okay. It's like, how do we work in a difficult space and potentially disagree with people over issues that are very dear to our hearts, and not get worn down by the fact that people are disagreeing with us? It's like, well, everyone's, and just meeting people where they are, what are their needs in this, being open enough to listen to that, and acknowledging your own needs as well, and finding that kind of meeting place where, as best you can, everyone's needs are being considered. And yeah, I guess that's where I go in terms of care for myself and others in those difficult situations.
And I think you're right as well, because you know, working within sort of public realm settings, for example, you know, there's a vulnerability, isn't there, that you're laying yourself open to. You are, in some respects, sometimes the first person that maybe someone has spoken to that day, or you know, you could be, you know, a person who's then being open to want to discuss these subjects, but then the person has a massive amount of anxiety around climate change. You don't, you know, start talking about that leading in with that kind of you know, kind of whole subject, because it's again, it's deeply off-putting, and it can be really, really divisive. So but I think you're right, there is a skill and there is an art in, you know, being vulnerable, being safe within that space, but also then allowing those conversations to take place. And as you said, Lucy, there's going to be times where you're going to disagree, you're going to have different and, you know, opposing views or whatever, but I think we've lost the art of debate, haven't we? I think we've lost that way of discussing. But I do know through the act of making and through the act of kind of these creative processes, it is that safe space where people then can share, you know, sometimes very challenging opinions, for example, but you can work together, I think, you know, hopefully within that to address something. And whether you know, it all ends up agreeing, it's not the point really. It's almost the fact that somebody's been able to share their views in a non-aggressive way and things like that as well. There's all those things. But I do know that I'm sometimes a bit terrible at kind of thinking about that and looking after it. I usually, like, especially after the festival periods, you know, we kind of we're exhausted because of that, you know, that kind of front that you're sort of trying to put on, that mask, that armor that you take with you because you're a little bit nervous. But I think that that's just something that you learn to work within and to understand. But I think it's important, and it's really nice to be able to discuss it actually, because we don't normally talk about that. So
I've just reminded myself of some wisdom I shared with somebody last year, which I think I kind of need now. Kind of fits in with the nature thing, is you don't plant a seed and expect to see the fruit in the same season, you know? So sometimes when you're impatient with things and how fast they're going, it's like, well, actually, things take time, don't they? And I need that wisdom for myself today, and just kind of realizing that actually not everything has to be completed at breakneck speed. Sometimes things need to do that. Like Cora, you were saying before, nature doesn't need us to teach it how to do things. Seasons turn, cycles come, you plant the seeds, the flowers come, and then the fruits come, isn't it? And it's the same sometimes with ideas and sharing knowledge. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Thank you for bringing us together, Claire.
Oh, you're welcome. I've got one more question. It's quite a biggie, but I think even if we don't answer it, or it's something for us to finish on, in your experience, what role do artists and makers have in inspiring systems change? So we've talked about we have to change the way in which we operate. It's just a given, and sometimes we're not given a choice, whether it's through extreme weather conditions or a pandemic. You know, we're being made to, but really, and not to put everything on the role of the artist and maker. You know, it's not. We're actually quite multidisciplinary just on this webinar today, in terms of our roles and experiences. But yeah, what role do artists and makers have in inspiring systems change? Maybe
well,
that
can I
is
just start? Yeah, I was going to say, I'm just going to jump in because I don't fully know how to answer it, but I will say something that I think artists can get really trapped in making these kind of climate change issues beautiful. And I think that we have to be really aware of that. And I think systems, you know, they're like, oh, you know, maybe that's where that change needs to happen to help artists kind of move away and actually be able to tackle some of these things in a much more authentic way. I use the word authentic. I'm not even sure if that's the right word for that, but I think that going back to this idea of a community of practice, I think systems need to learn from that and learn from their local communities, and listen. Again, I think we keep saying that, don't we? Listen more to that. I've had experience of sort of working within systems and outside of it, but I do feel that sometimes I suppose artists can be brought into situations where you're told to solve a massive issue on your own, and it could be a social issue or a climate issue or whatever, and it's like, go do some art and it will all be better. And it's like not that at all. And as you said just before, it's about working together as a whole. And I really strongly believe that you have to work with scientists, you have to work with politicians, you have to work with everybody to try and, you know, resolve these very difficult you know, issues that we're facing. And that idea of resilience, it has to come from a community. We can't, just expect to rock up and go, let's do some art and it, you know, we've solved everything. I think it's part of the puzzle, but I think from, you know, from an artistic point of view, don't lay it all on the shoulders of the artist, because but again, usually they're like on the front line dealing with this. But I think that background support is really valuable.
Do you want to go, Feimatta, or shall I?
What was I thinking is, what's the role of the artist and things in that is to kind of open little windows of possibility, isn't it, that allow people to look through and go, oh, I could step into that and do it in this way and whatever. So it's not really as a well considered or beautiful answer as Cora's or so, but I think that's my little thing of like to show that to show multiple possibilities, I think but I hate saying it's the artist's role, you know, like you're saying, Cora, it's like artists' role is to be artists in whatever way that works for them. Then they shouldn't be like, oh, you now have to deliver this or this or this. But in terms of the systems, if that's where people's artistic practice takes them in terms of engaging with these things, then, you know, that's something that people can do. And the other thing I was thinking of is I was at an event last week talking about environmental impacts in the classical music world, and somebody works for a management agency, was asking what their role is and what they could do. Is like, oh, you're like the yeast. So not the biggest ingredient by far, but the one that makes that little change, without which we wouldn't end up with the bread. So maybe that's the role. Sounds a bit gross, doesn't it? Role of artists: open the windows and be the yeast.
I love that. Just to add then to what Feimatta and Cora said, something else I wanted to share, I guess, is that how much the arts develops the skills in us that we need to be able to create a better world. So I'm in the process of writing up a research project that I did when I was sustainability manager at Rhombear Dance Company, which was looking at how dance in a kind of safe cooperative group space can help to develop what's called the inner development goals, which are basically a list of 23 skills and capacities that will enable us to achieve the sustainable development goals. And spoiler alert, but there's basically that the arts are such a profound place for that inner change and developing those skills that we need to be able to act towards a regenerative future. And just so in the research that we did, 14 out of the 23 skills were consistently reported as being improved or strongly improved. And for a little flavour, they are integrity and authenticity, openness and having a learning mindset, self-awareness, being able to be present, making sense of things, so seeing patterns, creating stories, feeling connected, communication skills, co-creation skills, trust, courage, creativity, perseverance, all these amazing skills and qualities that we need to be able to tackle issues of sustainability and regeneration. And I think, it's underestimated how much the arts are a fertile ground for developing those things in people.
I think that's quite a magical place to finish. And when you introduced that to us yesterday, Lucy, when we had our pre-meet, I really like those types of frameworks, those kind of because it helps me to be the advocate that I want to be for this work. So it gives me tools and to make that. And I was thinking about actually the role of the artist, what we need in order to change a system are kind of advocates, researchers, your kind of prototypes, you know, you kind of if you're changing something like that, that's what and that is what art and culture and creativity can support us with in terms of those requirements in order to change a system. So yeah, and I feel like that's probably kind of what my career has been based on. So on that note, I just would like to say a huge thank you to all of you for taking part in our second Women Who Make event today. It's been hugely inspiring, and yeah, we've had some really nice kind of comments being left in the chat. I know Naomi was here from Adverse Camber, who are a storytelling company based in Cromford, and the work that they do is integral in terms of sharing these stories, and I think it'd be really good to pick this up with Naomi as well. And yeah, so we don't yet have our next event confirmed. We are working hard on pulling the programme together. We've got lots of ideas. If you have ideas as well, please do share them with us. And get in touch. Caroline's been putting the links and everything in the chat. Please complete our survey on how we can kind of learn and improve from these events as we go along. It's all action research. We're learning by doing. And yeah, but thank you, Cora, Lucy and Feimatta for joining us today. And yeah, let's see how the Make Room grows and develops with your love and support in the future. But do visit derbyshiremakes.co.uk for more information about the project and our other projects as well, and to sign up to our newsletter to keep in touch. But thank you for sticking with us, and yeah, we'll see you very soon. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.